Today we're going to be looking at the newest category of Bricks FX 2.0, animated backgrounds. Now I want to warn you, before we look at them, they're going to look a little stupid out of the box. And the reason for this is that animated backgrounds really only look good when they're used very subtly. The problem is with subtleness, you can't see it when you're browsing through them, and I have no way of knowing what color scheme you're using or any of that. So we'll go through them and then I'll show you how to edit them. They're super easy to use, literally takes a minute or two, and you can get super creative with them. So let's take a look at it now. Hey guys, just to let you know, we're also having Bricks FX 50% off sale as our way of saying goodbye to summer. So use the coupon code GOODBYE. Now let's look at the different effects. Okay, so here we are. This is the first one, ambient glow. Got a couple of white orbs here moving around, and you know, like I said, out of the box, these don't look great, but let's go ahead and edit this one so you kind of get an idea of what it is we're going for here. You know, everything is set to white, although there is a dark version of each of these effects so that you have it ready to be used on a light background. So on purpose, I have set these to be way too visible, and you know, it's because you can make it whatever you want. So let's go ahead and we'll just go and Google RGB color picker, and we'll grab any color here. Let's grab this. This should look okay on the blue. And I'm just going to copy that. And if I go over here, I can come in here and just change my color setting. And now I kind of have a color that works. I can change my opacity, but also I can change the orb size. So maybe if I want a really nice big orb, I can make it, you know, say 90, and you see how you're getting just that, you know, that nice soft glow. You can change it around by changing how much blur you want. Maybe you don't want much blur at all. Or, you know, if you really want to blow it out, you can kind of really up the blur. So it's just a subtle little movement. And the same is true on all of these. So if I, you know, with the cascading threads, I can come in here, I can change the color, and you know, clearly you wouldn't want that opacity. You probably want it down at about 1. You know, you could change your length. You maybe want to have 120. That gives you those long kind of strands, and you just want it subtle in the back. Now, the chroma abbreviation one, this one again is clearly not meant to be this color. You would go in, you would set your colors to whatever you want them. So instead of this, maybe you want to have that purple, and you're gonna definitely not want this to be quite as you know, quite as pronounced, but it just gives that subtle movement. You can see the lines kind of moving. You could speed up the lines. I mean, if you wanted to, that would look kind of silly, but if you wanted to, you could speed them up. You know, typically though, you want to keep it nice and slow and just creating that kind of that depth. You know, digital matrix is another one, very interesting one. This is way too bright to begin with, but again, I've set them bright so that as you look at it, you can go, oh, okay, I kind of get an idea of what that's doing. So instead of a 0.5, you probably want this to be like a 0.2, and you'll see it's just that real subtle movement. And if you sit here for a second, you'll see that it'll slowly change over time. And again, just giving that idea of, you know, here with the drift particles, this one's kind of fun because let's say, I tell you what, let's pick a different color here. Let's go with a nice bright blue. Okay, and we will paste that in, and now we've got that set. You know, maybe you want these balls to kind of roam around a little bit more, no problem. Set it at 500, and now you'll see they'll take up quite a bit more of the space. You know, you're definitely going to want to slow this down. I keep them fast so that as you're browsing through them, you can kind of see, but you know, you probably want this one, I don't know, I would probably even do like a 90 and bring this down to about 300. And you could change your blur amount, you know, so if you wanted them to be really, really hard, or if you wanted them to be really, 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 really blown out, that might be a little too blown out. Okay, so, having a lot of trouble with this Windows keyboard on a... Okay, so here you can see I've kind of blown them out, and it's just ever so softly drifting around. And in fact, you might have trouble seeing it when it's this subtle, and I'm not sure if YouTube is picking these up. So I'm going to be a little more dramatic than normal, but here you can kind of see what's going on. And again, you can slow this down, you can speed this up. You know, you probably want to use a nice slow drift like this. And like I say, there's over 108 of these. You have drift particles, you have energy fields, which are working differently than, than the drift particles. Ethereal waves, which is, I actually really like this one. You come in here, we'll set the one color, and then you can, set the other color. Probably would have been a good idea to have colors set. So there you go, and you can kind of get whatever color scheme you want. Again, you would use your color picker and piece it together, but it gives you that nice gentle movement, Same with gentle aura. There's some crazier ones, like gradient shift. This one here can get pretty funky, but also it can be really, really cool when you use it with a nice floating image. Now, again, this is going far too fast. You would want this somewhere closer to probably like a 40 or even a 90 second. Like you want it slow and just a hint of it, The gravitational lens is probably one of my fave because it's so versatile. It looks right stupid out of the box, but all you do is you click on here and you've got your items here, and it's pretty basic. If you want to blur these out, let's give it a 30 pixel blur. See, there's a little more texture. We'll go 20. A little more texture than the other ones. We can give this a color, and maybe we want it to be a little more visible. So we go like this, but then, we can individually make them bigger, which, maybe that's probably a little too bright and definitely way too fast. So we'll slow that down. I'd even say more like a 70 second. And so as you can see, just using these gives it this very cool texture that is, kind of an abstract type background that, this is creeping so slow that your eye doesn't even pick up originally that it's moving. And that's why I've made it so that these are so over the top when you see it. For instance, this one here, which uses two colors on the holographic shatter, or I should say two layers, you can really play with this one and slow it down first of all. Definitely make it a lot more subtle. And just kind of play with it, and it gives you that kind of moving texture. Now, these blocks, as you're seeing, the black bars, that's just to separate so that I can show it to you. That's not actually part of the background. The Mystic Vortex is another one. I think you're getting the idea here how they're all, I tried to keep it so that they are basically the same settings so that you kind of know what's going on. Some get a little different. This one here has a spiral intensity, and you can change the opacity here, and then you can kind of see what's going on a little bit more. Set your color, and obviously, you probably wouldn't want it quite that bright, but you bring it down. The Nebula Drift, this is another fun one. You got 2 orbs. This here is the same, but you're able to color the orbs differently. The Plasma Storm, this one is very much off the side, and you can kind of separate how far out it goes with the settings. And then there's Pulse Wave. This one is pretty obvious. If you go into it, you will obviously not do it at this speed. You would bring it way down and, make it, you could change how big it starts on the inside. So if you want it kind of larger to begin with, like this, you can do that and kind of tune in what size you want. Set your color, set your brightness, that kind of thing, and your speed and the delay if you want it to hold there and then slowly open. Let's see. Quantum Lattice. This one's a great one. Again, hopefully the YouTube's picking this up, but just a real soft breathing lattice effect. And then I did a lattice dual, which basically is just the corners, and you can color these corners differently, which gives it a cool texture. And then you just, like I say, you blend this down to where you can just barely see it, and the subtlety is what really sells these. Ripple Flow, again, is a really cool one in terms of, it doesn't look great out of the box, but you throw a color into this, and it just sort of gives it that kind of Aurora Borealis kind of feel. And I thought this was cool, but I wanted to have a little more movement. So I came up with this one, and these ones here operate independently. So you can kind of see one is going to gyrate, and it should be mostly to appear random. Obviously, CSS, you don't really have the ability to be completely random. Again, same with Shimmer Streams. These would be, dimmed down. This one's a great one, fun, and it's just a couple of moving spotlights that come from the corner, and right now kind of jammed in this little box, but you can kind of see, and then you have stage left and stage right. So if you had a product thing, and you can, if we come in here, and you can obviously bring this down, you wouldn't have it quite so visible. And you can set the color, obviously. With all of these, you can set the color. And then this one's kind of cool because you could change the start width. So if you want it to be more of a small spotlight, or if you want it to be maybe a really big spotlight, that kind of thing. And that gives you a whole different look. Oh, I did 990 there. That definitely gives you a different look. So there's that. The spotlight sweep. This is meant to be, I tried to emulate a, those search spotlights in the sky. And then you got the 2, which gives you obviously 2 colors. And then the cross. And I believe that is it for these ones. So there you go. This kind of, gives you another paintbrush in your toolkit. This is not to be used all the time, but for the pain in the ass that it is to create these kind of moving backgrounds and to give it that kind of thing. Now, of course, you would have images here and text and all this. This is meant to be something just sitting in the back. In fact, if you look at a brick school, I actually used this effect here, and you can see the second orb here slowly kind of moves around, and it just gives it a slight depth, and it kind of keeps people's eyes on it. And in fact, if you see this is moving so slow, you can barely even see that it's moving. So there you go. Hopefully this kind of gets you jazzed. In the next video, I'll be showing you the other new category, which are the loops. But I wanted to show you the backgrounds and how you can use them just to give a depth to your page. And there you go. I'll see you in the next video.